Welcome back. David Penn here to the Professor Penn Podcast, episode 99, One Citizen at a Time. Hope you're well. It's great to see you. Here we go again. We're closing in on episode 100, so this is a kind of a special week for me. I want to thank all of you for your viewership and your listenership. I'm getting the greatest benefit out of this because I'm championing a return to spiritual borders so that the unchecked ambition of man is reined in. And I'm talking always in these podcasts about the material world and the spiritual world and how we become overbalanced into the material. And this is, pretty natural. We have the scientific method. We get the benefits of science. And it's almost like shiny objects that we humans grab for because there's benefits. And the cost of those shiny objects has been our freedom. So what we're working on here is a rebalancing of human life, a re-emphasis on the spiritual to inform the material. I'm not advocating for an end of science. I'm advocating for balance, the kind of balance that brings about well-being for the American citizens. When we have an unbalanced lifestyle, when our life is overly focused on purely material pursuit, we become unwell. When we rebalance, re-add, reinvest in the spiritual side, I believe, and from my own experience as a human being, because of course we're all operating in an experiment, and that experiment is our own lives. We're all scientists, so to speak, trying to figure out how to be well, how to maintain our well being, how to achieve longevity, how to live lives of meaning and spiritual insight. And when we balance that material and that spiritual out, it's my contention that we have a much better life. And when we have a political system that is balanced, that has a spiritual and a material pull to it, then the lives of the people are much better. And that is what I think the nationalist movement is all about. The nationalist movement can be fenced a lot of different ways. We got globalism and nationalism. It's global government or national government. Yes, there's many different descriptions, but I feel that one of the most important elements of the nationalist movement is a return to an emphasis on the spiritual within the borders of the United States of America. Therefore, I say, blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your Son to die on the cross that I might be saved. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. And for those of us that are dealing with a physical infirmity, I believe that I've received health for all my flesh. I believe that I've received health for all my flesh. I believe that I've received health for all my flesh. This is a very ancient prayer, and I've said before, and I'll say it again here today. It's thousands of years old. It's been prayed by millions of people, and the original version from which I derived this was in Hebrew. And we do have a Judeo-Christian background to our culture, and this is a prayer that's said every day by millions and millions of people. And now I've brought it into English because it's meaningful. It's a prayer of thanksgiving. So we have a lot of people that are coming to the podcast. I'm on X. Uh, you know, the people can't tell if I'm left or right there because we're going through a political a realignment and Democrat, Republican, red, blue, conservative, liberal. These words are losing their meaning because the narrative is falling apart. The narrative that polarizes the people into two warring camps, more and more people are figuring out that that's a scam. So there's a new political alignment that's starting, and that alignment is neither left or right. It is American citizenship and about protecting America's national borders and about the well-being of the American people. So that, if you're here and you've come and you're on the left, and I'm certainly a child of the left, uh, if you don't believe in God, we're going to talk about this because I'm out working peer to peer, one citizen at a time. The title of today's podcast, One Citizen at a Time. This is how we change the country, not by screaming at each other, not by hating each other, but by talking to our children, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, not letting the judgment, never talk about religion and politics, stop us from sharing the most important thing in our life, which is how we feel and think about the lives we're living. This is not a red team, blue team scrum. This is about spreading the idea that self governance is preferable to world governance. That's what we're doing here on the Professor Penn podcast. We're talking about the importance of maintaining self governance and freedom within the context of a growing world governance and a potential world tyranny, which removes the government of my neighborhood and moves it to the world wherever they put it, Brussels, New York. I don't know where they're going to put their new throne. Maybe it's going to be in Switzerland. I don't know what they have in mind if they win. I was just at a political meeting this last evening, uh, and we were sitting around talking about what we're doing. It was an official meeting, okay? This was not a kidding around thing. It was a group of political activists that are involved in party politics. And we had a elected representative in there talking to us, and he was telling the group all the legislation that was going through committee and was, heading towards a vote in the Minnesota uh, State House. And I asked this legislator, "What's the strategy?" I was baiting him. Okay, let me just be frank. I was baiting him because there's all these very novel new policies that are coming forth here in Minnesota because we have one party rule here in Minnesota that are really a departure from the decades and decades of my life. And, he was ripping on it and saying they're crazy and labeling them. They're crazy and they're leftists and they're radicals. It doesn't make any sense. And see, that's not true. See, that's not true. They're not crazy. And you can call them radicals, but that's not true either. They're an organized group of political people who have taken over control of Minnesota, and they're enacting an agenda which is meant to have an effect. And my question was, what is the overall strategy? To which there was no answer. Now, I don't know why there was no answer, and I'm not going to speculate because I'm not in this person's head. But I know what the answer is. The global governance is being prosecuted in your local neighborhood. So the importance of convincing, to talking to cajoling, to working with every single person in your life if you value self-governance and having arguments and discussions which are convincing, one citizen at a time, that government is best done locally, not globally. And that's what we're working on, and that's why we call today one citizen at a time. Now, it's a challenge to do it, and it's even more of a challenge to do it without getting caught up in the fight. And we have a leader now that the Republican Party is going to endorse, or at least it seems like they're going to endorse, because we have a national convention coming up, and I do not believe, as a party insider, that the controversy over President Trump's desire to run again is over. This guy has got a long road to hoe, and I have never been a Trump acolyte. I've said it on the podcast many times, and that's not about Trump. I'm just not into people. I'm into ideas. Now, if you love President Trump, that's cool. I'm not trying to say that's wrong. I'm making an I statement. I personally believe in ideas, not in people. My mother taught me many years ago, all people have feet of clay. In other words, I don't put people on pedestals, because when I do, it's disappointing. And so I don't do it. I just don't do it. And, Trump has many positive qualities, but he's done some things just since I saw you last that really are disturbing. And it doesn't mean that I wouldn't support Trump. It means that I, as an American citizen, need to work to hold him accountable and stay focused on the philosophy of what America First is really all about. What is it really all about? That's what we're working on here together. And when we say what's it really all about, we're writing the script here together as a community. Your comments, thank you for your viewership, your listenership. I listen to what you write me. I read it. I respond to it. Sometimes I try to incorporate the ideas in the next podcast. So I want to thank, Leland and William and all the people that are feeding me, information and ideas. I mean, that's what it is to be a community. So one of the things that's disturbed me since I saw you is President Trump has endorsed in Michigan a gentleman named Mike Rogers, who was previously in the Congress, who I went after 2 or 3 months ago quite intensely, because he is a sine qua non globalist who was an architect of the security state, of which I am opposed to. Yet Trump endorsed him. He's running again to be in Congress. And, I just don't get it. Now, I also have to say, on the other side, perhaps Rogers has had an epiphany. And I say this within the context of going to many political meetings, and when people start, there's always someone that shows up who's what they call the quote-unquote rhino Republican, which is also a non-meaning label. But somebody that is espousing globalist, materialist perspectives about the Republican Party, those being low taxes, low regulation, and a super strong military and a police force. That is traditional conservative republicanism, which this Mike Rogers is a purveyor of. And or at least previously, because I've been following his work. And I say to these activists when they're ripping on some poor unfortunate, hey, stop. We're not going to have this kind of, dialogue. It's just hate. Raise your hand if you voted for George Bush in 2000. And a couple little hands stick up. And I say, raise them high. And everybody raises their hand. I say, great. How do you feel about that now? Who in this room would vote for George Bush now? And 98% of the hands go down. In other words, 98% of the people in that room were also traditional, low tax, low regulation, empire seeking, police supporting Republicans. This is a change. We're repenting. Those of us that have critical thinking are looking at a forever war that impoverishes the people, and we're saying, whoa, there's a uniparty here. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. You people are supporting war and poverty. We're out. We're coming up with a new idea, and that's the nationalist movement, of which right now Trump is the leader. But we, the people, have to hold Trump responsible to the ideas he's alleging he represents. And when he nominates or endorses a Mike Rogers, I question his endorsement. but I leave open the space that Mike Rogers might have woken up one day, had a dream or a vision, and said, wow, what have I just done? I'm at the end of my life. I got to work my ass off to, to reverse the mistakes that I've made all my previous years. And that is what has to happen in the boomer cohort. And that's why you see this great fight in the Republican Party, because we got a lot of people that are repenting of their ways and starting a new political movement within the Republican Party. And that's going to make republicanism no longer a bad word. When the youth figures out that the Republicans are the anti-war party, that we're for the health and well-being of the 25-year-old, that we're not going to saddle your ass up with an automatic weapon, send you out to get killed, and if you come back missing an arm or a leg, we're going to pay for it by making the rest of the people poor. When the people figure out that this is an anti-war movement, that it's an anti-debt movement, and that it's about the well-being of the people, oh, hey, guess what? Branding changes. We're changing the brand of the party. But when the titular head of the party does things that we don't understand, we got to ask him a question like, hey, you were against TikTok, you almost banned it, and now you've come out in favor of it after meeting with a guy named Yass, who's got an over $30 billion investment in TikTok. They went, they met, and all of a sudden TikTok's on the good list. Well, TikTok's the same as it always was. But again, I don't understand all the inside pool here. It's much easier for me to comment than it would be for me to be a candidate. So I don't understand. I get to criticize policy or promote policy, but I don't have to enact policy, and I'm not running for office. Although I did say on a previous podcast, maybe someday I will run for office. Not because I have ambition to do so. I don't. I don't have ambition to do these podcasts. Why am I doing it? I'm doing it because I'm called to do it. And that is the benefit of me being in this community with you. It's not that I'm, wanting to be a leader. I'm doing what I'm asked to do, what I'm called to do, what I feel in my mind. And I don't say my heart, and I'm going to tell you why I say that about my heart. Hearts lead us astray. This is the whole thing. This is also part of the progressive movement. Follow your heart. Follow your heart. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for letting me follow spiritual borders, because my heart has got me into a lot of trouble many times in my life. And that's why I say, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Following your heart will lead you into some big trouble. Having spiritual borders will lead you to well-being. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to rediscover those spiritual borders that create well-being in the people. President Trump is under a lot of pressure. The man has bravery that is beyond any of our comprehension. Every time he gets up in the morning, every time he goes to sleep at night, his life is at risk. He's got 91 charges on him. He's got $500 million of fines so far. The guy is really a warrior and an example of true grit and being determined. We have to hold him accountable to the movement's ideals. And those ideals, which we're developing right here at Free People. And if you're listening to a lot of media, you'll find out ideas that we're developing here in this community are spreading throughout the entire conservative movement. It's not the conservative movement. It's the nationalist movement. So the Republican Party is changing from the Conservative Party to the Nationalist Party. And the conservatives are going bananas. Bananas. They're calling us liberals. Hey, no labels, please. This is a completely new political philosophy, a completely new idea about restoring our borders, both physical and spiritual. Number one. Number two, We have to. We must. You know, I think about, I'm getting sidetracked because I'm thinking about all these labels. Before we go into what we are, how can we even talk to each other if we go into it with a predetermined judgment about what the other person thinks? You know, there's so many people that are coming here that think I'm on the left. I'm not on the left. I'm not on the right. I'm for the United States of America and for the well-being of the people. Let's just focus on number one. Restore our borders, both physical and spiritual. Spiritual. We're going to talk about this in the context of one citizen at a time, just down the road. Look at this as an appetizer. But if we all had spiritual borders, if we all worked on our spiritual borders, because what is the globalist idea? There's no borders. There's no physical borders. And hey, whatever you want to do, go do it. You really think that's good for you? I know it's not good for me. I do things that aren't good for me, and I know it's not good for me. So I want to strengthen my borders because I want to live. I like living. I like it. I like being here with you. So the importance of this spiritual border thing, just number one, we have this ideology. Number one, restore our borders, physical and spiritual. Number two, these are the ideas you're hearing right here that are spreading everywhere. We have to turn the public debt, which is increasing at $1 trillion every 100 days, into private assets. Now, everybody talks about the public debt, okay? Blah, blah, blah. No, it's not just getting rid of the debt. It's making the money go into the pockets of the people so that we are economically self-governing, so that we're not dependent, because we're giving away our freedom for those shiny objects of materialism that our government has given us because we don't have any spiritual borders to reject it. So the fundamental building block are spiritual borders. I have spiritual borders. I don't want anything from anybody. I want to give. I want to be a giver, not a taker. How's that for an idea? I want to love my neighbor as I love myself. Ideas like that, ancient ideas of well-being. And then number three, we want to end the endless war. And this movement 2 years ago was jingoistic and rattling its saber. We're getting ready to go to war. And if you're listening to this movement and all these different news sources now, oh, all of a sudden, we're anti-war. The Ukraine war is not getting funded, just for example. Where's that coming from? This community. Now, I'm not saying it's just here at Free People Radio, but we have a big platform now. Hebrews goes on. Royce and I are doing Hebrews. We're getting 150,000 views, in a night. This is not going to spread through algorithm. It's going to spread through peer-to-peer, one citizen at a time. Please click the like button. Leave a comment. Bring your friends, families, and neighbors to the podcast. Spread it out. Help build a movement. We're not doing this to get famous. We're not doing this to get rich. We're doing this to maintain a Republican, democratic form of governance in a nation called the United States of America, because I believe that creates better well-being for my friends and for my neighbors. So please, go to Hebrews, watch Hebrews, spread it out, bring people, go to X. I'm on X. For all those of you who have joined me there, who are reposting, who are covering me when I get into a scrum there, because sometimes I'll get into a scrum, people will they'll say things on X that are so mean, it's mind-boggling to me. Because I know if it was face-to-face, nobody would talk that way, because if they did, teeth would be on the floor, right? So on X, people can say anything they want to say, and then I'm getting just hammered by people in the most unkind ways. And then out of the sun comes 2 or 3 of you and just protect me, and that is the best feeling, man. When you're out there in the ring and they're ganging up on you, and you realize you got people that got your back, that's called community. That's how we're going to do this. We're going to do it constitutionally. We're going to do it kindly. We're going to do it thoughtfully. We're going to work on arguments here and ideas here that will allow us to talk to our friends and neighbors in a way That's convincing without being ugly. Now this takes a lot of work, right? This is a long-term project. So, there's things that you can do to help in addition. Please go to freepeopleradio.com. Go to the store. You got to buy a t-shirt. It's going to be spring here. It's going to be summer. You're going to buy t-shirts, right? You need new t-shirts. We got fantastic t-shirts. You go there, you give us some money that helps fund this movement, and you get something back. And of course, we're not doing anything with advertisers except our own in-house strategy, which is tireget.com, TIREGET.com. Now, there's going to be thousands of people that watch this. 25% of you are going to buy tires this year. Please think of TireGet. The price is as good as any price that you can get anywhere on any tire. The price is right. I've been in the tire business since '79. When I tell you the price is right, the price is right. The customer service is fantastic. You might get to me on the phone, and I'm not going to sell you a bill of goods. I'm going to sell exactly what you need if you tell me what kind of car you're driving and where you're driving. We're not out there to clip anybody. We're here to serve you. And finally, we do the tire installation 5 minutes from your house, right in your own backyard. So it's everything you need. So please, here, come to us, and let me just give you a 1-minute Target ad just to drive the point home. Thank you. TireGet, TireGet.com. TireGet is here for the movement and for all the broadcasters and channels and stations that are presenting this content for you. TireGet is an online e-commerce platform where you can buy your tires. Now, everybody buys tires, or most of us buy tires. There's everything there that you need for your vehicles. All kinds of different brands, premium major brands, premium private label brands, every kind of tire. You go there, you pick your tire. We will ship the tires to the installer right by your house at no extra charge. You pay TireGet to have your tires installed. It's a one-stop shop for everything you need in tires and the best customer service in the tire business. So the next time you buy tires, think of TireGet. You got to buy your tires from someone. Please buy them from us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for watching. And now we're going to get on with the news that matters. And the news that matters continues to be troubling in the extreme. Every time I do a podcast, I've got a couple of days in between, and I'm waiting for some good news, like peace talks to start, or ceasefire to start, or Putin sits down with Biden and cuts a deal. Hey, something that would mean we're not all going to get killed in the nuclear war. Something really cool. It doesn't happen. The news keeps getting worse. In the Red Sea, the Houthis are continuing to shoot these rockets off, these anti-ship missiles, and they're interrupting the international cargo, the international ocean shipping. They're not really sinking these ships, and this is another interesting scam. These ships, a couple sailors are getting killed. About 3 sailors have been killed, and the Houthis are starting to hit these commercial vessels. They never sink them. They're not shooting the A game. These rockets must be homemade because, they're kind of like bottle rockets. The boats don't sink. So who's ever arming the Houthis are arming them with weapons that are good enough to interrupt international shipping, but not so extreme that these boats are going to the bottom of the Red Sea. So this is an economic war. And what does that mean to me in my backyard? Well, I have to shop. And I know something about international shipping because I'm involved with it. In December, the price of moving a container, a 40-foot high cube container, that's how they move the hard goods from Asia to the local box store in your backyard. That cost from going to Asia to the West Coast, it's about $1,500. It's about $5,000 today. Wow. Maybe $4,000. Depends how wired you are. So we've had a tremendous increase in the cost of ocean freight. This is inflationary. We just saw a huge spike in inflation in logistics during the COVID crisis. It was, again, about $2,000 before COVID, and at the height of the crisis, it was 20 grand. 20 grand? 20 grand? Boy, that's inflation, and people are going to say, well, it's the steamship companies. Oh, yes, it was. They made a fortune. And then the Elizabeth Warrens in the world, they're going to blame the logistics companies. Oh, those evildoers. There's shrinkflation. You're getting 5% less Doritos in your bag. Oh, look at how much money McDonald's is making on hamburgers. These people are masters of diversion. They're magicians. They're saying, look over here. Look at all these rich people. Tax the rich, which I'm okay with. But that's not the problem. The problem is government spending, deficit spending, $1 trillion of borrowing on the full faith and credit of we the people. That's you and me. We're paying for this. The full faith and credit, we're borrowing $1 trillion every 100 days. It's about $34 trillion. By the time we get to the end of this run on January 2nd, 2025, maybe it's $36 trillion. And that's if we don't have an it could be all bets are off. It could be $50 trillion. Who knows what it's going to be? Because this bill that McCarthy and Emmer passed with the Democrats makes a provision for unlimited military expenditure. No limits, no spiritual borders. So we got the small group of people in the House, this Mike Johnson, such as he is, because none of these people are perfect. He's not bringing this Ukraine vote to the floor, so it's retarding the lead up to a much broader war in Europe because the Ukrainians are not getting funded by the United States right now. And there's a big controversy over that. And where's the controversy coming from? It's coming from everyone that graduated from a university and went on to get a PhD. Because those are the people that are the purveyors and the beneficiaries of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. They went to high school just like you and me, took tests just like you and me. Yeah, they were a little bit better at it than most of us. They went to a 4-year school. Some of them went to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, where they got acculturated. They were brought into a worldview. And then they went to graduate school. They became doctors, lawyers, PhDs. And they took positions in the elite roles of our society. And our society is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. So those are the people that are getting the benefits. And it's a small group of people. And they hate me. They hate me. They hate you. Because they think we're dumb. They think we're dumb. And that is the new racism, where one race is superior and another is inferior. We got these educated people that are caught up in the hubris of their education. They're completely materialist. Most of them do not have any spiritual life. They're materialists in the extreme, and they are the purveyors of this ideology. And what does that ideology do? We have ours, right? Restore physical and spiritual borders, turn public debt into private assets, and the endless war. That's what we're working on. What are they working on? An endless war that impoverishes we the people. That's a very simple choice. Now, if we talk to our neighbors and friends just like that, and don't make it about Republicans and Democrats, don't make it about red and blue, make it about the ideas, people might say, we have been at war my entire life. I got a couple of young producers in here today. We've been at war their entire lives. All they know is the U.S. military deployed, killing people, and Americans getting killed. So if you're watching me and I have a very young audience and you have friends, now you're here, you're 26 years old, you got friends, you guys are going out, you're drinking. Man, when I was your age, I used to go out 4 or 5 nights a week till bar close. So you're sitting there, and I know why you're there. I was there for the same reason. But there was also time to talk. And instead of just talking about sports and whatever, put in a little question mark to your friend who's a Biden supporter and say to him, hey, man, the way this is going, are you willing to die? And he's going to look at you and go, what do you mean? Are you willing to die for your country? Well, how's that going to work? Do you know anything about the history of the draft and the selective service? There's no draft. Well, hey, partner, there could be. So for all the young kids that are out there, all you have to do is say to your friends, I don't want to die in a war. Do you? And this thing's going to change really quick because we've had this all-volunteer army since 1974. Like there's never going to be a draft again. Hey, they can't fill the spots in the Army now. They're 5% short. They're going to get even shorter on filling these billets in the military. And what they're going to do is just bring back the draft. And in fact, there's already legislation in Congress right today working its way through committee to reinstate the draft. Great. You want to die in a war? Then figure out who the globalists are and vote for them. You want to live to be old and have kids and grandkids and have a life fulfilled? Figure out who the nationalists are. We do not have to be in an endless war. That is the biggest scam in world history. And previously, when there was a war, before we had these kind of, incredibly destructive weapons, when there was a war, one side won and the other side lost. Today, nobody wins or loses. They've regulated war just like cigarettes. The war goes on forever and we pay for it, and our freedoms are diminished, and young men come home without arms and legs. Please, if you're young, start to think about the implications of an endless war and what it might do to your limbs, and then talk to your friends about it. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about the well-being of the American people, because they've got all these groups out there like the Houthis that are shooting missiles off all over. And then, of course, you get these real wars going, like this war over in the Gaza, which is going on and nobody's stopping it, which is another thing we really need to think about. When did we ever see a war like that and there was no peace talks? When did we ever see a war like in the Ukraine and there was no peace talks? Hey, this is a little bit unprecedented, right? At least in my lifetime. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that Israel would continue its, well, in this, I wrote it down, slaughter. And the only reason I wrote down slaughter is 4% of the Palestinian population has been killed or wounded in 9 months. And I said this, and I'll say it again. If you put that in American terms, that would be as if 13 million of your fellow citizens were killed or wounded in 9 months. That would mean somebody you knew was dead or was wounded in a war. You think that might change your opinion about war? I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. It does for me, because if they let this go on, it's going to be 10% of the Palestinian population, because the killing is ongoing day and night. Netanyahu vowed that he would continue despite what he called international pressure, and said Israeli forces would invade the southern city of Rafah, which is packed with 1.5 million Palestinians. It's just not packed. They're trapped, because the Egyptians, guess what they did? They built a wall to keep the Palestinians in Gaza. Something to think about for the people that don't want a wall. Here's what he said. Today, this is a quote, "Today, I want to tell you clearly, the Israeli Defense Forces will continue to operate against all of Hamas's battalions throughout the Strip, and this includes Rafah, Hamas's last stronghold." So, hey, this is heavy duty. Here's what the USAID official said in response. Quote, "A potential escalation of military operations within southern Gaza's Rafah governorate could result in catastrophic humanitarian consequences, including mass civilian casualties, extensive population displacement, and a collapse of the existing humanitarian response." Okay, this is a war now. Nobody's stopping this. It's not stopping. It's not stopping. One must ask themselves, why is that? We'll talk about that in a minute. And further, Netanyahu has also set a March 15th deadline to open up a war with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. So Israel's getting ready to fight a two-front war. There's no congressional military aid, but, the underground U.S. government is pouring weapons into Israel left and right. Israel is in no threat of running out of weaponry. We have to ask ourselves, why is this? Why do we, the people, have no say in this? There's some things here that got to get sorted out. In other words, what I'm trying to say is there's a government that's not elected, that's doing its own thing. And why do we know it? Because they just audited the Pentagon recently within this last year. There was supposed to be $4 trillion of inventory. They spent $88 million auditing the inventory. Half of it was missing. Where did it go? That's $2 trillion. $2 trillion of weapons is missing. It's not missing. Somebody's using it somewhere for some reason. And I just want to go back and say the history of this thing. Now I'm going to make up a story because I don't know what the truth is, but let me make up a story just momentarily. A story. 4 months before the Gazan war started, I watched and I put it on the podcast. Biden, Prime Minister Modi of India, Netanyahu of Israel, and MBS of Saudi Arabia, their king, Mohammed bin Salman, had a news conference in India where they announced the creation of a new intermodal cargo corridor from India to Europe. And here's how it was going to work. Boats were going to take Indian manufactured goods across the Indian Ocean to guess where? To Yemen, where the Houthis are. They're going to build a rail line across Yemen and Saudi Arabia through the Sinai Desert to guess where? To Gaza City. They're going to build a big port at Gaza City where all these goods would then be put on boats, sent to Trieste, Italy, and then distributed throughout Italy for the purpose thereof was to get Indian goods to Europe at a lower price and at a faster pace than what China could do. It was a great power competition, and the Indians were all in on it. Everybody was all in on it. A month later, Netanyahu goes to the United Nations and announces that Israel and Saudi Arabia are on the verge of a peace agreement and the opening of commercial relations. And he said, let no group have a veto power over this historic peace. Sounded great, didn't it? I thought, boy, that's uplifting. And a month after that, we had May 7th, and off we go to the races, and there's a war. And here's what I see. And again, this is a story. How are you going to do this intermodal corridor and have a radicalized Palestinian population at the port of exit? That doesn't sound very doable, does it? Sounds like there could be a lot of strikes, interruptions, terrorist events. Guess what? There's no Palestinians in Gaza City anymore. They're gone. They've been driven down into Rafah, and 4% of them are now killed or wounded. On a sidebar, Gaza City, instead of having to hire, demo teams to come in and blow it up and rebuild it, it's already rubble. Every building in Gaza has been destroyed. It's a rubble pile, ready to be rebuilt. And guess what we're doing here? We the people. The United States of America has announced a quote-unquote emergency military mission to do what? To build a port in Gaza to aid the Palestinians. I don't know. I'm not in the room. But to me, making up a story in my own mind because I'm a meaning-making machine, it seems to me like everybody got together and drove the Palestinians out of Gaza City, demoed the city, and now they're going to rebuild it and build their port to have that rail link and that intermodal corridor off to Europe. Maybe I'm making up a story. In the European theater, and I say European theater because you remember in World War II, we had the European theater, the Middle East theater, the Asian theater. Hey, we got theaters of war, Middle East theater. They're fighting in the Middle East. Do you know that the German Africa Corps and the British and the Americans fought for 2 years right in this area? In 1942. This place has been contested over for years. And why? It's called the Suez Canal and oil. It's not about the quote-unquote Jews. They just got plunked down in there by the British. And, there was Jews that were in on it. But, my family came here. My family looked at it and said, whoa, we can go to America or we can go to a war zone. We're leaving a war zone. We're not going to another war zone. We want to go to the New Jerusalem. So American Jews left. Europe came to the New Jerusalem. Many of us became anti-Jews here, gave up our faith. We've talked about it many times. But the Jews that are in America passed on this forever war in Israel. And it has been a forever war, forever from day one. And so now they're going to have a peace after this. And they're going to have, Gaza City's the port. I can't even stop talking about it. It's so fantastic. And in the European theater, Sweden, which has been neutral for a very long time, has now joined NATO. Great. They're popping champagne bottles. And so we got one more new country in NATO. And if you're sitting in the Kremlin in Moscow, you're saying, wow, these Europeans are going to gang up on us. We better keep fighting because if they get a chance, they're going to end our country because they tried in 1805, 1853, 1917, 1942, 1946, and here we go again. So from the Russian street corner, they're fighting for their lives in their borders. From the European street corner, all we hear is, the PhDs, the the Atlanticists, they're telling us that the Russians are an expansionist power. Well, if you look at the history, they were not expansionist since 1805. They've been the hunted. Well, this Atlanticist, globalist, post-World War II Democrat liberal order, it's just collapsing. The narrative is collapsing, not the order, the narrative. What collapses first is the narrative, then the paradigm shifts. The narrative is collapsing. This podcast is just one, what do they call that? Break in the wall? One break in the wall? Isn't it? One crack in the wall. Pink Floyd, this is one break in the wall. And of course, Roger Waters, who wrote it, he's a Nazi because he saw this decades ago. I should do a whole podcast on him. Remind me about that, would you? That's a good one to work on. Great music, great ideas. When we heard it the first time when I was a kid, we went, what the hell's he singing about? Because he woke up and got, not woke, he, looked at the history and said, wait a second, what are we doing here with people? Anyhow, this post-World War II Democrat liberal order paradigm is in control of everything, but its narrative is running thin. And I'm going to play a clip here, clip number 1, with Morning Joe Scarboro talking about President Biden. And you're going to see it, and I'm going to see it, and then I'm going to comment briefly on it, please.
I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, because he's been around for 50 years. And, I don't know if people know this or not, Biden used to be a hothead. Sometimes that Irishman would get in front of the reasoning. Sometimes he would say things he didn't want to say. This is, and I don't really, I don't really care. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it. And
there's a great movie where Christopher Walken plays a Sicilian gangster. And I think the movie's called True Romance. It's with Christian Slater. And he's sitting in a room torturing Dennis Hopper. And he starts talking about pantomime and how he can tell when people are lying. And there's, like 30 tells, and he's an expert in the tell. And, this is a tell. This is a tell. Let me give you an analog to this. I train a lot of people in my business, and they come to me and they talk to me, and I hear something frequently. And what they say is, let me be honest with you. And I always stop them and I say, please, does that mean you're lying to me the rest of the time? Please, let's not use that phrase, let me be honest with you. Because what it implies to me is, this is the only time you're telling me the truth. It's a tell. It's a tell. Here's, Joe Scarborough talking about, hey, I'm going to tell you the truth. He had so much cognitive dissonance because they give him a script. They told him to say this. He actually, his gears locked up, and he had to say, F you if you can't handle the truth. It's a total scam. To say that a man is as good at 80 as he was at 40, don't believe your lying eyes, okay? Let's not believe our lying eyes. We see the guy. Sometimes he's good. Sometimes he's bad. That's called getting old. Let me tell you, I had a grandfather. I used to call him Zadie, Yiddish word. My grandpa Jake. I named my son after him. Jacob Penn. Guy was great. Great. Super religious. And when I say super religious, I mean religious. Wore the hat, prayed 3 times a day, kept the Sabbath, really didn't chase money his whole life. He was never rich, didn't care. He was here for the search for truth. And I love this guy, and he's a big part of who I am. And when he got older, younger than Biden, when he was like 72, 73 years old, he started slipping a little bit. And he slipped a little bit more, and he slipped a little bit more. And it got down to the point where I was the only person in the family that could talk to him. You could say I was crazy. Please call me crazy. For me, I could always communicate with him. Maybe it was a Vulcan mind meld, but he had dementia. Some days he was really good. I mean, some days he was great. And other days he was, to use a Yiddish word, and it's going to sound really, the word comes through the meaning. He was afterbottled. The guy was not good some days. And so when you get older, you don't always have good days. So to say that, this is the narrative completely coming unwound. When your media figures lie at this level where we can just look at it with our own eyes, like the Nord Stream pipeline. Hey, somebody blew it up. Some people say the Russians, some people say the CIA, some people say the Ukraine. We don't know. We weren't underwater with the dudes that blew the pipeline up. We don't know. Even when somebody comes up and says, we've got the evidence of who blew it up, the evidence could be fabricated. There's certain things we just can't really know for sure. We have to make an inference knowing that our knowledge is incomplete. But when we look at Biden, we know this guy is not as good today as he was just when he was vice president under, Obama. And then Joe says he used to be a hothead. He's better now. He's not better now. He's too old to be a hothead. And from what I hear behind the scenes, he loses his temper still pretty good when nobody's watching. I used to be a hothead. And I still am. I can still lose my temper. I mean, I just jumped up in a meeting with 600 people and scared the hell out of some folks because they threatened me. And, that's violated my spiritual borders. So I can still be a hothead. But, when you get older, you become more measured in your response. And when you become old enough, you don't have the juice to get mad. So that narrative is just, that is a vignette of people just lying and just saying, don't believe your own eyes. Back here in Minnesota, it's a mirror of what's happening in the Republican National Committee. Now, we've had a turnover. Ronna McDaniel has resigned, basically forced out. She's Ronna Romney McDaniel. She's the niece of Mitt Romney, who's also resigned. Mitch McConnell has resigned. The globalist Republicans, because it really isn't about Republican or Democrat, it's about those that pursue globalism and those that pursue nationalism. We're sorting this out now. These globalists, they're resigning. And the RNC has had a power shift. Now, it's too soon to say what that means. Here in Minnesota, the Minnesota GOP is controlled by ex-military. And, when you're military intelligence and people tell me you're ex-military intelligence, you know what? Ex what? When do you stop being military intelligence? You don't. That's a lifetime job. So our key positions here are either military. I'm talking about the people that run the GOP in Minnesota. Many of them, too many of them, are either ex-military or ex-military intelligence. The chairman of our party, David Hand, is ex-military. Our RNC members, one of them is a man named Alex Plekish. He's ex-military, he was a Marine. Our other National Committee person, Barb Sutter, her husband, Randy Sutter, who is the head of CD3 where I live, he's ex-military intelligence. And I could go on and on. These people are entitled as American citizens to have a political opinion. I am not disagreeing with their right to believe what they believe. I disagree with any attempt to thwart the will of the people because the people are organizing now. And we had a thing here in Minnesota about 2 years ago in a place called Ottertail County. They have something called the Ottertail County Basic Political Operating Unit. And I'm going to tell you, I'm in CD3, I'm in SD45. I know everything going on in my backyard. That's someone else's backyard. But so when I comment, I have to comment with the caveat that I don't know all the legal facts. I don't know all the historical facts. I'm just telling a story of how it affects me as a party participant and as an American citizen. It makes me go, what's going on here? Because they had two sets of leadership up there. They had a traditionalist group or a globalist group or whatever you want to call them, because I'm not into labels, but they had a group of people that believe one thing. And then they did have a group of nationalists that were trying to take over up there. And those nationalists were unseated and sat down. So what did they do? They organized. Now, this is up in Nowheresville. Nowheresville. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, too, because, I got these people around me right here in my own backyard, these traditionalists is a nice way to say it. They organized, and we had our caucuses on February 27th. That's when we gather in our neighborhood meeting rooms, and we elect delegates and go through party business to run the party in Minnesota. And these people that were unseated 2 years ago, very unceremoniously by the party, based on the story that I understand, again, not knowing the historical and legal facts. So when you're watching me out there, because I know you do, I'm not making any statements of fact. In fact, I'm saying I don't know what the facts are. I'm telling the story as we, the people, understand it. They went out and organized. They organized. They spent 2 years organizing. They got 500 American citizens to attend caucus in Otter County. Now, here in SD 45, we probably have 10 times as many people. We had 250 people. So that's what happens when American citizens work peer to peer. Anything is possible when we actually roll up our sleeves and do the work. Everybody wants to go to a meeting and talk about things. No, that's just entertainment. That's why I'm not doing those meetings anymore. I want to be around people that don't have time to meet. They're so busy changing their neighborhood. Those are the people I want to be involved with. And they were up there. They got 500 people to come to caucus, and they elected over 100 delegates that reflected the nationalist sentiment. Wow, that's a bombshell, isn't it? Remember we talked about the loyalty oath on the forum a few podcasts ago, and I said, whoa, this forum's not cool. And I was assured that the forum would never be used to keep people out of the party. I said, but that loyalty oath, there's going to be people that will not sign that because they're not loyal to those ideals. We got to get that. And I was assured by attorneys, don't worry about it. Just sign it. Just sign it. It doesn't mean anything. I said, what you're telling me is to sign something. And if I have sacred honor and I don't believe it, why would I put my name down on something I don't believe? This is a problem. What are you doing here? And in fact, we had a big argument. In fact, there was a very nice lady who works with me politically, was in the party. I think she's 90 years old, and she's sharp as a tack. I just walked into this meeting with her last night. She walked up the stairs like a woman 30 years younger. I really respect this lady. We don't agree. She's a traditionalist. Politically, we don't agree. But I respect her service. I respect her integrity, and I respect her well-being. She's beautiful. And we were at this meeting several months ago, and this galoot started rolling on her attorney because she was arguing about this form. She and I agreed. This is what's interesting about politics. We agreed that the form should not change, that we should try to include everybody, not hold people out. We agreed. A traditionalist and a nationalist agreed. And this guy rolled on her. I said, stop right there. I'm going to make a non-political statement. This woman's 90 years old. You better back off or you're going to be dealing with me. Because I defended her. That's self-governance. That's having the courage to defend the weak against the will of the strong. That's the American system. That's the Electoral College. That's the filibuster. That is protecting the rights of the minority. That's why we don't have a democracy. That's why we have a Republican democracy where the right of the minority to be a minority is protected constitutionally. Isn't it interesting that that's what the left wants to remove? The guardrails of spiritual borders? Oh, anyhow, to let you know about my Republican Party here, there was a big fight up there in Otter County over these forms and over how the caucuses were run. So our leader, David Hann, decided, and I don't know how he did it, and I don't know if it was legal or not, I'm not counting. Those 100 elected delegates, he unseated them and reseated the delegates from 2022. I don't know procedurally if it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but I want to read one line from his letter. He wrote a letter. This is from David Hann. There are a few general observations I would like to make. First, state statutes and the Republican Party rules specify that caucus meetings are conducted under the authority of the state law and according to the rules and procedures of the Republican Party of Minnesota. Listen to this. We, that is the Republican Party of Minnesota, we are a private political association, and we have the right and authority to conduct our internal party procedures and to affiliate with those who choose to abide by those rules and procedures. Did you get that? I'm going to read it one more time. This is the Democrat Party, also citizens. American citizens, let's wake up and figure out what we're dealing with. I have to read this one more time. This is one of the most important paragraphs where, the quiet part is said out loud. We need to understand this, the importance of our political participation. State statutes and the Republican Party rules specify that caucus meetings are conducted under the authority of state law and according to the rules and procedures of the Republican Party of Minnesota. We are a private political association, like the Nazi Party. And we have the right and authority to conduct our internal party procedures and to affiliate with those who choose to abide by those rules and procedures. American citizens, I've been sharing with you since podcast number 1. This is podcast number 9. The importance of getting off the couch and getting involved in your local party, be it Democrat or Republican. If we're going to change the country, if you're watching me and you like a forever war and debt that impoverishes the people, then I'm just entertainment for you. You're looking at a lab rat. Great. There aren't too many of you watching. The people that are watching Free People Radio resonate with this content. This is never going to change until we, the people, actually get involved. Join your local party. We need every state. We need thousands of new people to come into the process, follow their rules and procedures, and vote these people out of power. It happened at the RNC. We don't know really what happened there yet. It's too soon to say. There is a tremendous infiltration of both parties with ex-military. Now, I have my best memories and my best friends from that frame. The military ex-people are split 50-50. Well, I don't even know if it's 50-50. In my life, it feels like 50-50. It could be 90-10. Again, I'm making up a story. I know ex-military people that believe in globalism, that believe in empire, and believe that it's America's right role and responsibility to be the greatest country on this earth. There's other people that believe, ex-military, that they never want to see their sons and daughters go through the hell that they went through. And they're doing everything they can to deconstruct empire and create a nation state, the United States of America, that has spiritual borders. So this new political realignment, globalism empire versus nation state, it's everywhere. And when we start to look at things through that lens, I think we'll have an argument and a conversation with our friends and neighbors that will be a one citizen at a time winning conversation. Now, when I say one citizen at a time, man, I mean it. Boy, do I mean it. This stuff is so serious, I have to take time for a joke. I have to take time for something really funny. I've been talking a lot about a globalist named Bill Kristol. Bill Kristol. And Bill Kristol's father was a PhD, secondhand jerk-off. I should look him up. I bet he was born in Europe. And then he had a son, Bill Kristol. And Bill Kristol was the editor of the Weekly Standard and a more globalist, empire-building, neocon worldview. I mean, he is the grandfather of this thing, this Bill Kristol. And I had one of my viewers, send me a text. He goes, Bill Kristol, what's wrong with Bill Kristol? Bill Kristol? Well, let me tell you, let's play number 2 for 12 minutes and have a little laugh. This is Bill Kristol.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Billy Kristol. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, there's very little that I can add or say about Ali that he hasn't already said himself. And in this evening, I would like to pay tribute to this man who was a hero of mine with a piece that I wrote that he lived, and I call it 15 Rounds. Hello once again, everyone. My name is Howard Cosell. We are awaiting the arrival home of young 18-year-old Cassius Marcellus Clay, the young man who at the recent 1960 Rome Olympiad shocked and amused the world with his boxing ability and braggadocio, if you will. Here he is now, only 18 years of age. Cassius, do you plan to turn professional?
Yes, I do, Mr. Cosell. See, nobody's ever seen nothing like me. So fast, so pretty. I'm so fast I can play ping pong by myself. And I'm predicting that someday I'm gonna gain 30 pounds and I'm gonna become the heavyweight champion of the world.
Sonny Liston is not coming out incredibly young. Cassius Clay, just as he predicted to this reporter 4 short years ago, has knocked out the man he called the Big Ugly Bear and become the new heavyweight champion of the world.
I am the greatest. I am the greatest. I am Muhammad Ali. I will never be known as Cassius Clay again. Cassius Clay is a slave's name. I'm now a disciple of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I'm now a black Muslim minister. I am now Muhammad Ali.
In the top of the news today, the eyes of the sports world to focus on Houston, Texas, where heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali, also known as Cassius Clay, is expected to refuse military induction on the grounds of being a religious, conscientious objector. In other news, the Vietnam buildup continues.
I will not fight in this war. This war is an unjust war. I cannot, will not fight.
Step forward when I call your name, please. Cassius Clay. Cassius Clay. Gentlemen, please, I have a brief statement. As Commissioner of the New York State Boxing Association, we are issuing the following proclamation. A few hours ago, heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali, also known as Cassius Clay, refused military induction. We are hereby stripping him of the heavyweight title. Now. The State Department is also revoking his passport. Therefore, he will not be licensed to fight any place in the world, including exhibitions. Today, June 20th, 1967, Ali today was convicted of draft evasion, fined $10,000, sentenced to 5 years in prison. There will be an appeal.
For 3.5 years, I couldn't fight. My best years, my prime years, my great years. 3.5 years, man. My great years, my good years, 26, 27, 20.5, 9 years old, you know? But then, out of nowhere, the state of Georgia, 1970, gave me a license to come back and fight Jerry Quarry. Ugly Jerry Quarry. I couldn't wait. Only took 3 rounds. Knocked that sucker out. Then I went into Madison Square Garden against Oscar Bonavena. Ugly, he's awkward, you know, coming at me. 15 rounds I had to go. 15 rounds. And I used the left hook. Knock him out. And now Joe Frazier's the champion. I want Joe Frazier.
The winner and still heavyweight champion, Joe Frazier.
I still think I won. Now I guess I gotta start all over again.
Today, vindication. Ali's conviction for draft evasion today was overturned by the United States Supreme Court by an 8-0 vote. Ali was right. It is indeed an unjust war.
Howard, I'm free. I'm free at last. Now I can become heavyweight champion again.
Yesterday, an unknown heavyweight from San Diego, California, one Ken Norton, defeated Muhammad Ali, and in so doing, broke the ex-champion's jaw. Ali fighting 11 rounds with a severely damaged mandible. I'm in the hospital now with Ali. His jaws are wired shut. Perhaps poetic justice. But more importantly, at the age of 33, have we seen the last of the great one? Muhammad, is this the end for you?
No way, Howard. Ain't no way, Howard. Even though I got my jaws all shut, I'm still pretty, Howard. Ain't I pretty? Even though I got all this stuff, Howard. You don't think I can come back, huh? You with that red toupee. You don't think I can come back, man? When I can come back, all I've got to do is start all over again.
George Foreman is down incredibly here in Zaire, Africa. Muhammad Ali, at the age of 33, has knocked out a seemingly invincible George Foreman here in the 8th round and become only the second man ever to regain the heavyweight title. An incredible upset.
Go sell, you chump. I told you I was the greatest.
October 1, 1975, Manila, the Philippines, Pearl of the South Pacific. Ali Frazier, the third time around. Frazier unable to answer the bell for the 15th round. The Thriller in Manila. This was not boxing, this was a war. A big piece of Ali remained in that ring.
I fought everybody. Everybody there was to fight, I fought. I didn't duck nobody. I was colorful. I predicted the rounds. I was bigger than boxing. My fights are seen all over the world. I fought ugly Joe Frazier 3 times. I fought Ken Norton 3 times and sat through Mandingo twice. I was big in every place I go, they know me. I go to Bangladesh, they yell Ali. Ali, I go to Africa, they Ali Bombaya. I go to Russia, I see Brezhnev in person. Carter can't get him on the phone. And at the age of 36, I'm 36 years of age, I'm still pretty. Ain't that something? Not a mark on my face. Ain't that something? 36 years of age, I'm still fast. They say I'm slowing down. You know, they say I'm so fast I can turn out the lights in my bedroom, be in the bed before the room gets dark. The only thing that could whoop me now is Father Time.
It's over. Young Leon Spinks, with only 8 professional fights, has decision to seemingly aging Muhammad Ali here in Las Vegas. An incredible upset. So much like the young Cassius Clay 14 years ago in that ring in Miami Beach. The champ is dead. Long live the champ.
He surprised me, that Spinks. I guess at the age of 36, you know, I couldn't train like I want to train, you know, couldn't do the things in the ring I want to do. Gave that ugly sucker the first 7 rounds and tried to come back after him, you know. Just gave away too much, you know. Every time I reached back for that something to knock him out, just wasn't there, you know.
That's good. Thanks.
Hell, he was so ugly.
We're not going to go all the way through it in the interest of time, but that's Billy Crystal. That's Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal's pretty funny, and I let that run because, and as I've said before, Muhammad Ali had such a great impact on my life, and it was such an inspiration, and he was something, if, you know, when you're seeing him ex post facto, if you didn't actually live through the 60s like I did, there's just no way to capture the feeling, the excitement, the scope of this man's life. What he did was, you know, supernatural. That's why they call him the greatest of all time. You know, I was watching Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, who's, whoa. They interviewed him, and, you know, I watched this. He talked about Muhammad Ali, and he said, you know, and he was crying. Tears were coming down Tyson's face. He's going, Ali was willing to die for this. He was willing to die. He said, I'm not willing to die for this. This man was willing to die for what he believed in. That's sacred honor. That is spiritual. And what you looked at in Ali is what spiritual power is all about. And, you know, not comparing myself to Ali, just comparing myself to myself. We just never know what happens when we give over to the search for truth. Now that we get these other people, now the joke is over. Let's listen to Bill Crystal, the dark Lord himself. And we're going to see the complete other. This is why this was a joke when this friend of mine said, I thought what are you talking about, Bill Crystal? He thought I was impugning Bill Crystal. Okay, here's the Bill Crystal that I was impugning, and you're going to get a dose of something not so fun.
We wildly undervalue the importance of America serving as a sort of anchor of the international liberal order. That's partly a matter of military presence and power. A lot of it's diplomacy, engagement, alliances. Some of it is economic power. I think a world in which America is present, is engaged, supports allies, supports the forces of liberty where possible around the world, tends to be a safer world. I just think it has been historically. We tried the experiment of America not being very involved in Europe in particular, before World War I, or before World War II, or Asia for that matter, before World War II. And it doesn't seem like these parts of the world naturally come to some kind of peaceful balance. And so I think it's rare, the degree of peace we've had for the last 70 years. You know, when I was in government, which was 25 years ago, Europe was a key partner of the U.S. in military aspects, but of course diplomatically in NATO and so forth. And it was easier, really, to have a liberal world order that was anchored by the U.S. and Europe. It still is, but Europe, I think, has retreated some in terms of its willingness to take on international obligations. Its military budgets are very small. Military power is not everything. They could do other things, and they do development assistance and diplomacy and so forth. But some American conservatives just, sort of dismiss Europe or are somewhat hostile to Europe. I'm really not. I wish Europe played a bigger role, honestly. We're able to play a bigger role. We're organized enough to play a bigger role, had enough support among the peoples of the various nations to play a bigger role in foreign policy. But Europe has become pretty inward-looking. In the current moment, I think Syria is the poster child for the price we pay for not intervening, for just assuming that, well, they'll work it out over there. And now we have 500,000 dead and a terrible migrant crisis, which has destabilized neighbors and actually destabilized Europe in certain ways. Now you pay a price for interventions too, obviously. They don't always go as you hope, and they have their own collateral consequences. This argument that we can't afford to, in effect, be a kind of world policeman, to use a term that's usually used by critics of this, isn't the case. I think we can't afford not to. The cost we end up paying to restore order is so much greater than the cost to maintain order. I think that's very much true of the world. It's very true of just any city. It's sort of like paying for the police force. And if they don't have to make many arrests, if the crime rate's low, people at some point say, why do we have these cops walking around? But if you don't have the squad, if you don't have the alarms, when something bad happens, you pay a big price. And I really think the world is like that too. People don't like the idea of being the world policeman. It's a little bit of a thankless job. You get blamed for a lot of things. This is why allies are so important. But I think, again, the cost is, it's just not that great, honestly, and we could afford to do it.
Well, that was a full-throated endorsement of globalism and European Atlanticism. This is the dark Bill Kristol. We had the funny Bill Kristol. This is the idea that the nationalist movement is opposing, that America must be involved all over the world to maintain peace and order. It's really, from my perspective, it's a scam. I've watched it my entire life. I mean, of course, 500,000 casualties. It's horrifying. I just don't know where the idea came from here in the United States that we would have an empire. This is a British idea. We are the inheritors of the British Empire. You talk about Syria. Go back to the roots of the Syrian crisis. It's the Sykes-Picot Agreement, where the European colonial powers divided up the Middle East amongst themselves after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Syria and Lebanon became part of the French colonial enterprise. They scrambled these places. They turned brother against brother, Shia against Sunni. They thwarted the natural cultures of these places. They armed people with weapons of far more lethality than what the local people had. When you really have not, super lethal weapons, even if you hate each other, the killing cannot get too extreme. You give someone an F-16 fighter, hey, they can do a lot of damage. So the root of this thing, the whole problem is about colonialism. It's about the belief that one race is superior and another is inferior, and the Darwinist impulse that came out of, the European colonial powers to dominate and subjugate all the peoples of the earth, and then to extract wealth from these places. These people were just bank robbers. They're just thieves dressed in nice clothes. So we're trying to overcome the inheritance that we have. And, what does America have in common with India, in China, in Syria, and Iraq, and Iran, and all these different countries all over the world? We were all colonized people. All of us were colonies of some European political formation, some king, some queen, and all these countries were colonized for the purpose of wealth extraction, the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy. Now, after World War II, and it's a week of remembering, of looking back. We talked a lot about the Atlantic Charter and how President Roosevelt enforced upon Churchill the concession that in exchange for American support, England would agree to let every polity self-determine. So we came out of World War II with an idea that every uh, country, every group could determine its own political destiny. And it didn't take very long for the Atlanticist European ideologies that had penetrated our elite institutions. And why was that? We had a new country. Our university system was not well developed, so we sent our scholars to Europe to be educated. And they came back with European ideas. They got jobs working in our new universities, and they taught the kids the European ideology. So we have this deep tie, like Bill Kristol does, to Europe. He wants to be involved with the Europeans, even though 1776 was a divorce from that European business model. And we can take a 200 and 300-year detour and look back and say, whoop, that was a mistake. Why are we involved in this business model where we're in an endless war and the people are impoverished to pay for it? Why are the people so unwell? Why is there so much, crime and gun violence and all the things that, are bandied about like political totems? Gun violence is a perfect one. To kill, there's something wrong with you psychologically. You're lacking in spiritual borders. Just lacking in spirit. If you steal, you're lacking in a spiritual border. And what does the left seek to do? It seeks to take those traditional spiritual borders, whether you believe in God or not, and delimit people from those borders. Because when people are not spiritually bordered internally, they need governance or chaos will ensue. And so if you need governance, that justifies an ever-expanding government that rules over we the people. And that is not what America was about. America was not about an omnipresent government that told me what to do. But that's what we're fighting today. That's where we're at. So when I say we have to convert, convince, convert, that was a Freudian slip, actually. I'm followed by a lot of people now, and I had a young man jump up out of nowhere. I never heard of him before. And he goes, and I do have to compliment him. I'm not going to mention his name here. I hope he's watching, and I hope he comes in the live chat. Because, he just jumped out of nowhere and he said, because I was talking about, spiritual borders, and he said, define a spiritual border. And I took the energy on his post. When I read it now, it doesn't seem particularly invasive. But at the time, it was such a non sequitur. I thought, wow, I'm confronting something here. So he said, define a spiritual border. And I said to him, a spiritual border is the essence of our Constitution. It is self-governance. And then he said, if someone believes in God, how can they self-govern? Which was a little bit of a, pretty sophisticated, this kid's a thinker, and it was a sophisticated way of baiting me. And I answered him, and I said, I do not believe, and I do not think believing or not believing is relevant. Let me start again. I do not think believing or not believing is relevant. Culture is at its least a survival strategy, and at its best an optimization strategy. I propose that our politics transition from the current post-colonial model to one that is focused on enhancing citizen well-being. This is a matter of intent. And he answered me, "Damn it, your response upsets me because I have no rebuttal." Now, this is called making a friend. And I did say to him, I said, "Great." I answered him, I said, "Then let's continue our dialogue and build bonds of friendship." And this is when I say we have to work one citizen at a time, peer to peer. I know I get hyperbolic sometimes on the podcast because, I'm trying to be an entertainer. But you also know I try to keep it, in the center of the road. And I don't mean center of the road politically, I mean emotionally, where I'm open to talking to everybody about any subject. And I say politically in Minnesota, I'll go anywhere, anytime, in any place to talk to anybody about any subject. And I say the worst that can happen is I'll lose my ass in an argument and I'll learn something. I don't take it personal. I'm on a trip of self-discovery, the search for truth. So this one interaction that I'm sharing with you at the end of the podcast is one of my highlights of my political career here in Minnesota, because I had a chance to work with someone who was clearly opposed to me, and I spoke with him in a way that made him search for truth. And I'm not saying he agrees with me or disagrees with me. I'm saying we had a dialogue that was respectful, and in that particular engagement, he paused and said, "I don't have a rebuttal." He may come back to me and ask me questions that I don't have a rebuttal for. And that's what our governance is about. It's about sharing, respectfully listening, learning, and searching for truth together. So I want to thank you for being here with me today. Our next episode 100, is a milestone. I'm looking forward to seeing you. That'll be Thursday night, 7:30 Central Standard Time. Please click the like button. Please leave comments. Please bring people to the podcast. Bring people to Free People Radio. The algorithms are not going to support us. We're held down. And when the people discover the content and discover the goodwill we're trying to bring forth, that being the well-being of American citizens, we will form a political movement, and we will have, as a community, the ability to influence the future of the lives of our family members.